Okay, I understood that you don't have that much time, but I'm incredibly happy that you agreed to have this conversation with me.
Yeah, sure.
I was planning to do so for a really long time. We discussed before, we've never met before, but just now we discussed that we were living in Vienna at the same time, doing more or less the same things. You had an exhibition there that I saw and admired. And we were also organizing a lot of public events at that time over there. And we were thinking all the time to invite you there, but eventually it never happened. So at least this way, after actually 7, 8 years after that, we got in touch, and I'm incredibly happy that we managed and that you agreed.
Yeah, it's so crazy because, yeah, what I told you, I was there between 2009, 2012, and you at the same time. So, yeah, I wish we could hang years back, but yeah, now we do it online.
Now we do it online, and hopefully there will be a chance to do it even offline. And hopefully we will keep organizing physical gatherings, because when people actually meet in one place, the experience is much better. And that's also what we've discussed with all the guests here online, that it's okay to meet online, but it's much better to meet in real life.
Yeah, that's correct. But yeah.
Let me introduce you a little, although I'm pretty sure it's really not necessary, because anyone who is watching us right now certainly knows who you are and what you do. I would just say that you combine fashion, haute couture with technology, with interaction, and certainly computational design. And that is one of the parts that I'm most interested in. But first, I would like to ask you, what have you been up to recently? Regardless of the pandemic, regardless of staying at home, what have you been up to work-wise?
Yeah, I was basically one of the settings. I was involved with a few big projects with Cirque du Soleil, and as you might have heard in news this week, they filed for bankruptcy, and they're trying to get back together and back on all of that soon. So basically March 9th, I came back from a shoot in Orlando. And I recorded a project that I did with them, my latest project with them, and we never had a chance to bring it out, sort of. So that was very sad. So so I've been I've not been traveling as much. Normally I travel around for the brands and to go to the clients and all of that stuff, which I could not do now. But I've been on 2 big projects. One is for Ubisoft, the gaming company, which comes out later this year, I think in October, November, which is kind of cool. I cannot tell too much about it, but it's a project with an amputee dancer. So yeah, so that's gonna be that's kind of a cool thing that I'm currently involved with. I am creating with a prosthetics company in Orlando the socket design. It's an arm, and that is a little bit different than what I did before. I work with Victoria Modesta, who is a bionic pop artist and super badass. And I created several legs for her, I think 5 or 6. And yeah, working with an arm now is slightly different. First of all, yeah, you don't lean on it, so it's like less work in a way, but there's other like restrictions. So working with vacuum pumps to make the socket fit really well, and all of that stuff. So it's really interesting to have, instead of working with legs, work with arms. So that project we're recording actually next week. And the sad thing is I'm not going to be there because I cannot fly at the moment with COVID, especially be here in America. We're not doing super well here, containing the virus. So basically everything is going to be shipped out on Friday and on Monday by post. Yeah, so it's a crazy deadline phase. And the other project that I'm doing is a project based on EEG, which comes out in September for Ars Electronica. And that works with, again, a new project with working with the brain and brain signals. So that's a very technical project, whether the Ubisoft project is very design and body technical because it has to do with prosthetics. Whether the other project is, I'm diving into after I deliver this project, is very high level, like technological, because it has to do with like, yeah, brain signals and all of that stuff. So that's kind of cool because sometimes I have like a design project and then a very like body signal technical and I like it to do it that way, because otherwise it's always design, or it's always coding, or it's always like that sort of. So it's kind of cool, and yeah, what I say, it's kind of nice, because we all are more stuck inside, and that also gives the possibility for like some personal projects as well. So I recently launched a proxemics dress that I'm working on the next version with, working with ultrasonic rangefinders. So sensing the people in front, and also working with thermal sensors, so also measuring how many people are in front of the design sort of, and the design is making a physical boundary, a physical space. So that's kind of a personal project that I just want to make for myself, because I like my personal space, as you guys might know. So a lot of the projects are about that. So yeah, so it's work for clients, which is really fun. And because of the whole COVID situation, also yeah, having the time for some personal projects,
which is a good thing in the bad situation.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah. What I really admire about your work is that it's a full package. So there is a social connotation and social reasoning. So you said you like your private space, but even the proximity dress looks like it's answering the current situation. But I really believe it is based in your longer term social-based agenda. Then it's got all the technology that is really high tech, and it's always the hottest and latest stuff that you are using. And also it combines the design. Is there one of these parts that you consider more important than the others overall, and maybe even in each of the projects, like the social aspect and the meaning, than the technology and the design?
I think it all comes together. I think a good project is, I come from several backgrounds. I come from fashion, couture, tailoring. I come from sculpture, more the sense of design sort of. I come from, yeah, sort of the coding background, a lot of open source. So I think like a good, and also interaction design. So I think a good project is when all these things are intertwined. And I think while doing a project, either me by myself, whether me with collaborators, friends of mine often, it's all about having different hats on when I explain it sort of, you know. So you need to look at it from, okay, how does the design look? What does it do? What is the intellect? And as you go through this design process, you put different hats on, the hats of the designer, the programmer, the like whatever the fashion person, you know. So going through that, everything needs to be right in a way. I think like if you look at some of my designs, the spider dress has two versions, a laser cut version and the 3D printed version. We can talk about that a little bit later. If you look at the spider dress, it gives you a psychological thrill when you look at it, you know. If it's a pink dress and it's all organic and all flowery, then it doesn't give you that effect. So it gives you a psychological thrill when you look at it. Then yet when you interact with it, it also does something very daring, you know. It's really robotics on the body, and it's really out there to get you, you know, to stab you almost. Whether you look at the smoke dress, which has several versions as well. The smoke dress is a very elegant, very symbiotic, a pear-shaped design. And when you look at that, it's more about emotion, the shyness, hiding away behind smoke, for example, you know. And I think that if the design is correct, the way it stands on the body, the way it moves on the body, yeah, the statement that it gives, the intellect, if it's a wacky design, the interaction is not really doing it, sort of, you know, you walk up to it and it's like, okay, what the fuck is going on? That's not something that's super, yeah, that it's not a whole sort of, you know. So I think at one hand, I'm fairly perfectionistic about it, whether also giving place for error. I like that sort of, you know, lets the machine sometimes decide itself what to do. But I think it's overall a lot about that everything needs to be right, sort of, you know. If I don't need to have to explain whether it's maybe sometimes for a lot of a lot of like connecting pieces sort of, but I should not have to explain to our nieces of 6 years old or my grandmother what it does sort of, you know. You need to have a design that that can interact with you no matter what, and also translate that message no matter what sort of, and that is a big part what I'm trying to do using interaction design and what my research is about basically.
Oh, it shows the way you communicate your things. It shows that it's you put a lot of attention into all the aspects of what you are doing. But when I'm hearing you, and also when we were discussing this debate before, and also when I look at your promotion, it seems like you put a lot of effort and emphasis on the interaction design. And I think it's a valuable thing to do, because it gives a reason to the design and to the technology that you use, and it makes it somehow understandable for everyone. Is this intentional? Do you care that people understand what you are doing and that they value what you do?
Some projects I do, some projects are research projects for myself, and I want to confuse people, you know. Synapse, my dress that works on EEG and works with body signals, is a really internal thing for me to research the stress on the body sort of, you know, whether like spider dress is really out there to make a statement. So some designs are there to like for me to more research. Asian unicorn that you can see over there is a product using EEG, and that is it's a unicorn horn, and it has a little camera embedded, and it works on EEG. It measures the P300 a signal which is measuring focus and attention. So it's created for kids and kids with attention deficits, so ADHD, and in there, yes. At one point you want to make a statement, but I do it in a little bit a different way, because what I want to do is make the child like the device sort of, you know, instead of being in a doctor's room, in a white room with all these electrodes on the head. That's not a pleasurable experience for the kid, right? So what if there's like unicorn horns? It's like super awesome. And what if they have different colors and all of that stuff? And most of all, they can take this device, put it on their head, and also take it off sort of, you know. So talking about this device, like one point is to show off, and it's cool, it's a unicorn horn, but most of it is to make an sort of a simpler way and a more ideal way for the child, you know, to have a more fun device to play with. And you get them into this different mindset if you do, you know. And then for me, from my side, what do I want? I want to gather data in order to maybe possibly be able to help to see. And in this case of Asian unicorn, what I didn't notice is that, yeah, the kids are super interested in data, right? Like the kids grow up with that. And in Asian unicorn especially, they like to see the data behind it. They like to see that their brain signals are spiking, and it's like, whoa, you know. So it's a really a win-win situation in that case, and that's ideally something that you want to create sort of both in an artistic way. I refer to the user in this case, the child working with the unicorn horn, and also me as sort of the researcher in this role, sort of, you know, seeing how I can gather that information, that data, and make it visible back to them, and work with that, sort of, you know. So again, the interaction, but also the design really helps in this case in Asian unicorn.
That's the interaction, and that's the purpose of the things. Let's talk a little bit about the technology behind. You mentioned the Synapse EEG dress. Can you talk a little bit about that and about the technology that is interesting for you behind that?
Yeah, Synapse was when I was working with Intel. Intel is a semiconductor company that you guys probably all know, and I was working there in Portland, Oregon between 2013 and 2014. I was on the Intel Edison team, which was a small microcontroller, like, or a little module that I was working with, and I tried to push as much out of it as I could, sort of. And by that, I wanted to connect it to different body signals, and really test it out, sort of, you know. So Synapse is a dress which is has embedded in their EEG. So it measures the brain signals. It also measures the stress levels. It uses a respiration sensor within the design as well. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to measure her stress level while she was walking around, because I do a lot of things for showcases. So like I work with models, and it's really fun to work with models not only to just like display, work with them to display something, but also actually to work with them, you know. So I was working with my model, her name is Whitney. We also used her for the spider dress later on with Intel, and she's super badass, and she's all in like mindfulness and meditation, all of that stuff. But I wanted to see what the effect was of stress behind, and this is not really like out there, but my case study was the stress of working with her just behind in a photo shoot, just walking around, versus her stress on the show floor, you know. So that was kind of a cool thing that I could connect that, and I was behind the screen looking at what happened. So she had a camera, so I could see what she was seeing, where she was going, when she met people, what was there, when she met a friend, you know, what happened to her EEG, what happened to her respiration, so her lung volume, the way you use your lungs. And what was happening, what situation was happening, sort of, you know. And that was for me a very internal and hard to explain kind of thing, because it's less like a show thing, sort of, you know. It's really there to research yeah, the impact of stress on the body while she was walking over the show floor. And that was CES in 2013, that was, I think. And CES is it's the biggest technology showcase in the world. It's in Las Vegas. So I mean, there's a lot of like things and a lot of distractions and all. So that was basically the perfect situation to research that. So Synapse is really addressed about yeah, different stress levels and all of that stuff. Really a research project for me, and yeah, it has been really dear for me, and also for Intel, like especially the people that I worked with, like for them it was really interesting to go through this really weird kind of abstract kind of like research and using the Intel Edison. So yeah.
Do you maybe at this point want to show your screen and show some pictures, or yeah, the pictures that you have, are they related to this?
Yeah, let me just pull some things up. I think I just talked about Agent Unicorn, so that's a thing that I can show you. Yeah. Let me see. Let me pull it up.
And while we are then talking, it would be really nice if you could point out things that you think that people should observe at your designs, something that you really would like to point out at all the designs. And then while you're showing the pictures or videos, I would like to also discuss the design itself.
Yeah, that's good. Let me just, I'm just trying to get a more recent one. I'm just trying to find one of the presentations that has a lot of the stuff behind it, sort of, I guess. Give me one little second, because I want to put them in each other. Oh yeah, this one should be fine. I will share my screen. If any of you have questions, we're live here, so feel free to ask as well. So let me see. Can you see this?
Yes. Yes. All
cool.
Good.
So I'm just like getting into one of my presentations in halfway, sort of. So I'm not sure what I'm working with, but like basically the space that I work with are here: the intimate, the personal, and the social and the public. So that's always what I correlate to. If we talked about proxemics and the proxemics theory before, when we talked about personal space, this is basically what we refer to. So we have all these space around the body. That is from somebody called Edward T. Hall. In his book, The Hidden Dimension, he's writing about this, but that's a little bit what my research in personal space is about. He was measured, it's in the 60s with like a stick. So he measured the distance between people using a stick. And I took his research in 2005, 2006. I took that and I translated it using ultrasonic rangefinders and proximity sensors and all of that stuff. So I'm measuring that digitally, and I refer to that a lot. So I work with biosignals, so you can think of different things like EEG, you can think of pulse, EMG, muscle contraction. We have respiration, so the lung volume. We have accelerometers, the place in space of your body parts. the heart rate and the heart volume, temperature, and all of that stuff. So this project that we just talked about in specific is called Ancient Unicorn. So it's a unicorn headset. It's a BCI in EEG terms. We talk about brain-computer interfaces, and it has a little camera in the top part. And it was a project for the European Commission. So this was the beginning of the first prototype. It was like a little camera. And then I connected it to EEG. And what I wanted to do was working with kids with ADHD, and children with ADHD are a little bit more excited for the world. And I wanted to see if there was a correlation between that and like using a camera on their head. And
I've got a question. Is that a coincidence that you're wearing the same pullover?
No. Yeah, no, it totally looks like that. But somehow the mother of the child, she brought her in, and we were like, there's a photo of us just standing there, like we had the same thing. It was in the Netherlands, maybe it was in at that time or something. But like normally I do like styling, and this was definitely no styling. So that was really funny. I will try to post the moment that we saw that we had the same shirt, maybe in the chat if I can find a photo. So that was really funny, and it's not exactly the same photo. It just looks like the same material, but it looks like it. But yeah, but she has she has the device on her head, and what I wanted to see if when your focus goes up, the camera goes up. So I wanted to see in an ideal case, for example, you take the child to a zoo, you know, and it gets excited, right? We can see in the waves that some of the brain signals go up. And I'm measuring P300 here. So in an ideal case is that she is walking through a zoo and she gets excited by the lion, by the panda bear, by whatever animal, you know. So in an ideal case, it is like she gets certain excitement. The camera goes on and records whatever is happening in front of her. And that correlates to the dress that I did before this called Synapse. Only Synapse could be worn by only a model. And here I created a device that can be worn by multiple people, sort of, you know. So this is, and I think you cannot fully see it, but this is the P300. So that's the brain, that's the set of signals that I'm researching. So P300 are these basically red dots that I'm using, and that is related to what we call the ERP. So what I could do in the design, and this is a design project, a collaboration with Igor Knesevic from Los Angeles. He's one of my design partners. One really hard thing that we still haven't figured out is really creating a headset to really make it mount to different sizes of heads. So it would be like S, M, and L, large, small, medium, and large, sort of. So we were doing a lot of like research using different materials in order to make it conform really well to the head, sort of, you know. So you can see here some of that, because headsets and scaling is still a big thing, sort of. Whether if you use TPU, you miss a little bit of that strength of like really mounting to the head, and you also want it to be comfortable. So this is the small size. You can see in the back. You can see the casing. So that has basically the system in there. You can see in the front the camera, and if you go back here to the P300, all of these could be used because it was like a mohawk situation, and then the rest of the electrodes are in the back of the head, sort of, you know. So that was that was the main thing of getting the electrodes really well set to the head. That was like a big thing. So this was the prototype. So in this case, I worked with a company called GTech because the main thing was that if you're working with medical EEG, that is really reliable. You can work with a system is $10,000. You can work with like other things like NeuroSky, and they're cute, but they're not super reliable of what data they give to me. I had a hard time with that, sort of. So you need to really this multi-factor kind of setting. Some of the other ones, and they got much better, but there's a difference between a headset, an EEG headset of $200 versus 10,000. So while working with the P300, this was with the company Google Technology in Linz. So most of sort of the design and figuring out how to use 8 electrodes, which normally you use over 60 electrodes, 64. So it became this really small module, which was actually really, really cool. So this was the prototype, and that was for Ars Electronica. We presented it there. And now, and this is not a really good photo of it, but I have it here as well. Now with that, what we could do is making it a smaller, smaller form factor. So it's not necessarily in the whole headset, because I'm not using the unicorn here, but this is the current design. So I'm going to show you, I can show it better on the big screen. So what we are doing and what we try to do is going from this to a device. This device is still $1,000, but it has the worst of a medical system, which is like normally 10,000. So with this, with the collaboration with this company, it was kind of cool that we could bring out some brain-computer interface, which was 10% of the price. And the other thing is, like, if people could not like buy this, or students or whatever, there was also this whole thing around it. Brain.io, if you go, we do the hackathon today and tomorrow as well. So I give a talk tomorrow at 9:30, and we started to do these, mainly GTech. I was involved with a few of them. So the Asian Unicorn is the inspiration. We keep hackathons for in cities. People can work with the BCI. So let me see. I'm just going to show it here. You hear a lot of like noise on the background, but I don't know.
Yeah, I do, because my microphone is off. So. I don't know. I think I can spotlight you so that only you are.
Yeah. So this is like the system that we are at now, and it's called the Unicorn Black hybrid. So here you can see all the electrodes, and then they have these little things that you basically pop up. So this is a little bit like a different system. It works with a gel. So these are the electrodes. And that's the system. So this goes like around the head. So it's a really small system, which is really cool. And normally, I don't think that I have it there. The Asian Unicorn, what is kind of cool about that one is that it's based on gold-plated electrodes, which are these. So these mount directly to the skin. Whether with this system, because of like this is. I don't know if you can see it really. There's like there's like different kinds of electrodes that you can use. This one goes directly through the hair into the skin, sort of, and it makes a good connection. This one we often use the gels. So you have like a gel that you use for that. So there's like different ways that you can use EEG, and the gold-plated ones are in the unicorn horn. So those are from, that's the company from GTech. So it's a lot of, I guess, like working with technology is always trying to find like what is out there, what is new, or how can you make your own. This is a microcontroller that I did with Paul Stofregen. It's a Teensy, so we made it a pink Teensy. So those are the ones that I mostly prototype with. This is an older one, Teensy 3.2. So it's all about like either using existing technology, doing collaborations, sometimes doing collaborations in where you both with a company both figure it out, or you make your own. I have a few projects on Hackster.io and Instructables in where I used Eagle, which is now from Autodesk. I used it prior to them being from Autodesk, but so there's 2 projects on there. I think a project for Swarovski and a project with kitty ears, and those are both made in now Autodesk Eagle. So that's in PCB design software. So I think that's the kind of cool part about working with technology. You can go from working with things that are existing to really building your own stuff, and you can make it as custom as possible. If you work with a body, you want mostly like either a small form factor or a round form factor, so it just flows better with whatever you're making. And then often circuit boards and PCBs are not made because they're always like square, so in that case you might want to look into creating your own boards, and that's a lot of fun, and you can give them all kinds of wicked stuff and colors and all of that stuff. So I think for me that is the joy to be able to work with electronics. And the other thing is like everything became much smaller. I started with this about 18 years ago, beginning of 2000, and one of my first smoke dresses. I always make the joke. It's like it had, I think, 7 versions, and the first smoke dress had like really a big sort of computer. It was like before Arduino. I met Arduino and the guys in 2005, and that was like, yeah, a slight bit before. Like the things that I was working with, they might look nice from the front, you know, it looked like, oh, that's cool, that's elegant, but you turned around and it was like, rah! So there was like a big computer, like anything that I needed to stash, I just stashed on the back of the design, you know. So like whether that was like a huge computer, for example, like now it's or like even smaller. So that's also the joy of seeing technology change, and yeah, that's always, yeah, the funny thing with technology partners that I work with, sort of that notion of yeah, sort of Moore's law, and yeah, things becoming smaller and more adaptable, and that's really cool for the fashion tech field, you know. That really makes that the ease, accessibility, open source, all of that stuff, but also like other things like yeah, flexible circuits, different battery solutions, yeah. So it's fun. It's a good time.
Let's talk a little bit also about the design. From my observation, I would really like to know, how do you create the design itself, the casings and the dress. But from my point of view, when I compare what you do to other fashion designers and tech fashion people, the designs that you have are very close to what we architects are doing. So it's kind of on the same wave, the same paradigm, the same things that we pursue in our designs. I can really observe it in your designs. Could you talk a little bit about the design itself?
Yeah, whether fashion is more often something like really soft, you know, I think that's part of what I learned with couture and tailoring. My big fascination are like exoskeletons. I'm a big Giger fan. I had the pleasure to meet him before he died. I think like a lot of like, yeah, the things that I like are bone structures, are things that that are found in nature. I love animatronics. I love working. I worked a lot of time in Los Angeles with the bigger studios, and they show me their animatronic, their monsters and all of that stuff, and I'm like, I always like to, it's like, okay, before you put all the fur on there, I want to see them, because I just love all the mechatronics and animatronics and all of that stuff together with like exoskeletons. So I think a lot of that goes into there. Trying to make them comfort to the body, sort of. It definitely has a certain kind of style to it. Sometimes I work alone, sometimes I work also with collaborators of mine. Like Nicolo Casas is a good friend of mine, and I will tell a little bit later a story about that. I work with Philip Wilk and Tia. I work with Igor Knesevic. He's from Croatia. So I hope, Igor, I hope I pronounced your name right. So it's all like, yeah, super dope people and super dope friends that sometimes I go into a collaboration with, so that we are trying to figure that out. I mostly start, the thing of working with electronics, it's really difficult. You cannot just do anything with it, sort of, you know. You need to look at what electronics do, what you can make with it, what are the limitations. And working with electronics, you work with the body, you work with interaction design, you work with technology, so there's a lot of restrictions. And this is what I like, because I like to work with the notion of the restriction of the technology, and also with the possibilities of the technology, of course. But I think, like, yeah, what I like is, yeah, working with the materiality that already defines something. There's a product called Intimacy, where I work with a PDLC foil for Studio Rozengaarde, which is a studio in the Netherlands based on interactive landscapes. And I worked with Ján Pernecký on creating dresses for him. So if you look up Intimacy 2.0, you can see dresses based on PDLC foil, polymer dispersed liquid crystal. And that was a hell to work with in the beginning, regarding to see the band, what it can do, what it cannot do, sort of. So you always need to take so many things in consideration, you know. So I worked with a lot of like sculpting before, and I'm gonna try to show you maybe some of the designs prior. Let me just pull something up. Okay, here you can see like sort of a little design process, and this is like I think 12 years ago.
We don't see the screen yet. Oh, now we do. Now we do.
So this is one of like a very experimental design. It was for ISEA in Germany, and I was doing it at V2 Labs, which is in Rotterdam, which was a really cool. It was called Institute for Unstable Media. And that institute is there to work with artists and all of that stuff. So I did like a summer residency there. So here you can see what I normally did was like sculpting a lot of pieces. So this is from made from A and B component epoxy, in where you see like sculpting by hand. I used to come from sculpting backgrounds, and it has a lot of like dust. When you're working with it, there's a lot of dust sort of. And this goes into the bigger thing. But this is pseudomorphs. It's based on the notion of the drop of ink in water. And I wanted to capture that idea. And this, again, this is 12 years back, right? So I make first an impression of what I wanted to create. And then I started to search, and I went just to the hospital at that time. I was like, I need stuff. What do you have regarding to tubes and all? And they were like, oh, great, an artist. So that was really fun. I ended up working with Festo, using their solenoid valves, actually, which you can see here, which I have been using for a lot of things for liquids at that time. So that was really cool. Here you can see one of the small ones. Here's one of the boards that later on I started to use for multiple things as well. It was run on a 9-volt battery, so that was really cool for that time. And that was 2008, 2009, I think. So here you can see some of those dresses.
Was this at the exhibition in Vienna?
That was also in the exhibition. Yeah, correct. So that's like a really experimental design sort of. But why I wanted to point that out is that I worked a lot with epoxies before, and I think you can see me now again. I worked a lot with epoxies before. I worked a lot with leathers. I'm allergic to dust. It's a funny thing. If I work with fabrics, I get super allergic. If I work with wool, I'm just dying. So in my fashion classes, I just was always like I don't know, you know. So one of my personal reasons to work with leather and work with materials or sometimes fake leather and all of that stuff is because I'm allergic. Then another thing was that I used a lot of epoxy A and B complement epoxy to sculpt things. And in 2007, 2008, I got a lot of problems with my lungs, and I went to the doctor. So, and the doctor said, maybe you should stop working in the workshop. That's how you do it. And I'm always wearing respirator and all of that stuff, but still stuff, yeah, you get into stuff sort of, you know. So in like at that time, I could not use that anymore. And I had a friend of mine, Rijn van der Mast, and he said, I want to take you somewhere. I'm going to pick you up. And he had his sport car, it was really cool. And he said, I'm going to pick you up, and I want to bring you somewhere. And that was a company called Materialize, which you know is in Belgium. And they were super awesome. And he's like, I just want to introduce you to these people, because I was getting into like 3D modeling software and all of that stuff, and 3D printing. And he said, like, that can be an interesting connection. And at that time, I also was doing that was a little bit later on. I was doing like a project for Volkswagen, and this is the first time that something needed to be produced, and except for like just an experiment and experimenting with all of that, needed to be produced in a certain timeline for IAA was a big show with 12 designs, I think 8 or 12 designs of mine, and that became also a new version of the smoke dress. Smoke dress I made before, partially 3D, partially like just using materials, and it had multiple smoke dresses. There were 7 smoke dresses by that time, because I always try to update them, sort of, you know, just like with the spider dress. And at that time, I got also in contact with Nicolo Casas, and we said like, we were talking about like, okay, love your work, and we became friends. And at one point I said like, hey Nicolo, do you want to collaborate with me? There's this project with Volkswagen, and I want to recreate like my smoke dress. So we started to go into the research of getting that into 3D, which was fun for both of us because, and I'm going to see if I can have some of the, visuals. I think I have here. So the smoke dress. Yeah, so the smoke dress is based on this notion of spaces. Again, there's sensors in there, multiple sensors. And when you come close, it's the notion of the octopus pushing out ink and diving away. And the more people are around the dress, the more smoke it gives, sort of. So for Volkswagen, in the end, me and Nicola created this dress. So that's the smoke dress with the whole system. And here you can see it as well. Not going to show most of that, but like one of the big things of the former smoke dresses that I made was that I wanted to innovate on some kind of better projection of the smoke. So what I wanted to do was create a space in the hips, which you can see here, by which normally in the former smoke dresses, the smoke just came out sort of, you know, and there was light and there was movement, so it was fine. But what I wanted to do was create a twirling effect. So like creating space in the hips basically, and then having sort of the smoke come out, and by that it caused this like better effect. And also like working with 3D printing. At that time, TPU, so thermoplastic polyurethane, came out, which you can see here. Of course, you're known to it, but it was a new thing there. So using selective lace sintering to make it also a flexible dress. And here you can see some of the research of the smoke coming out. I think in this more twirly effect, sort of. This one was for a shoulder piece. Let me see if it pops up here. So you can see the smoke go around. So that's the big innovation on this version of the smoke dress, basically, that it became this sort of twirly effect with also the light shining through it. So the smoke is still the smoke is still based a lot on I don't know, I just opened a presentation. So the smoke is still based on inside, the presentations always go better. I'm working at this moment with whether like it was a huge system before when I started it in like around 2005, 2006. It's a small system of 500 grams now on the back of the design. It works with a heat nozzle and silicone fluid, so it makes it hot and then it spits it out. And I could trace it all the way into the hip area for this design. So you can see the rester area in the hips in where it evolves, it twists around and it then is being pushed out. And especially if you're walking, you're also creating a dynamic flow while you're walking, sort of. So that's a really nice kind of thing. So yeah, my main reason getting into 3D printing and all of that was because of health reasons, sort of, and like Materialize was really there to like, I've been collaborating with them for many times after that, and I think they're super badass. They were really, what I always say, like they were really rots in the field, you know, from far behind, from where before 3D printing was cool, sort of, you know. They did a lot of like medical stuff, and that was really cool for me because I like the medical aim. So that was a really fun collaboration. So every time when I went to France or when I passed by Belgium, I always went there to say hi and to see what they were up to. And so yeah, I think Materialize super cool.
We can open this probably for also for our audience. If anybody wants to say or ask something, now is the time. I've got one more question. I understood that you are kind of in a hurry, and we are very lucky to have you here. But still, I've got one more question before somebody else asks. It will at first sound a little bit personal, but it's still work related. So I've been following your work mainly on the social media. You're publishing a lot, and I've noticed that whenever there is a picture of you, you have all sorts of tools. You're soldering, and it seems like you're doing a lot of electrical installations, and and even some sort of machinery, I would say, but I've never seen you a picture of you behind a computer. Is that what are your tools? Could you name a set of tools that are the most useful for you?
Yeah. So I'm working on my computer. I think I'm about too much time I spent on it personally. What like for hardware, like what machines I have things now installed in my home. I don't know if you see it. It's a new Biamo laser cutter, which is a 30-watt laser cutter. I don't have the pieces here, but I'm working on that for the Ubisoft product, which you can also see there partially, but I cannot super show it. Like it's a product based on polygons, and I'm using like laser cutting parts and 3D printed parts, so that's cool. What you can see there, I think, is also like, this is basically my home studio. I'm at home right now. Is my 3D Dremel 3D printer. So it's a 3D45. So those I use just to test things. If I want to like verify things, you know. We have a bigger space up the road here, but we don't want to be there right now because of COVID, and it's more space with multiple people in the building, not in my space, but in the building itself. So I just set up like a really small studio here. So that's kind of nice. Behind here is my soldering, soldering place that I do like soldering. And this is for me just if I have an idea in the middle of the night that I can just step out and solder something together and 3D print and all of that stuff. So that's kind of nice. From the computer side, what I use is like most of my designs are based either in Arduino from the start. I started with Arduino in like 2005, Python, project use OpenCV, which is the facial recognition software from Intel. Currently, I do a project with MATLAB for the EEG project, so 18 Unicorn. The new project in September is MATLAB, which is connected to the controllers. Eagle for PCB software design, which is now Autodesk Eagle. For the design aspect, it is Fusion 360, Maya, AutoCAD, and currently a project with Igor in Blender, which kind of made a comeback, which is kind of cool. I've been watching a lot of Alessandro Sumparelli doing cool things with tissue, and like a lot of, I think the architects are getting into Blender, which is really fun. For me, it's a funny thing because he's from the Netherlands, so yay Blender, and also open source, so yay open source. So that's kind of cool, and it's really funny to see Blender evolve from this thing, how it started as a cute like open source tool to the thing that many people and architects are using right now, sort of, you know. So definitely, I think that's a super cool thing as well. I used to work a lot with Autodesk, so Autodesk and at Pier 9 as well as an artist in residency for multiple times, coming back because they had like all the cool machines that I could use. So I was a lot, when I was in San Francisco, I went a lot to the workshops there. And if I use surfaces, it is in Europe, it's always like Materialize. It is here. Shapeways is a little bit easier, so I work a lot with Shapeways. In LA was 3D Systems at that time when I was in LA. So it's a lot, it's from hardware, software, to surfaces, and everything in between, basically.
Cool. Still, I'm asking people if they want to contribute or participate in this debate. It usually takes some time until people unmute themselves and so on. Okay, if not, I've got the final question for you. What's next?
We're locked inside of the house, so.
I mean, you can elaborate in two ways. You can answer like what's next for you, but I would be also interested in about a global scope. What do you think is next? What do you think that matters next?
I think a lot of like interesting like material research is being done. A lot of cool machines that have been created over the last couple of like years are ready to come out of their labs. I think a lot of things come out of the lab because people are more like less. I can see, I think what's coming is that the brands, especially I collaborate a lot with brands, is that people are less so on marketing, but more so on pushing their new innovations and technologies out of the labs, because that is a really important thing. Whether a lot of things normally from brands and companies comes from the marketing department sort of, and all of that stuff, that's a little bit on its on its side right now, you know. So you can see that people are getting into their pet projects in companies and actually say, okay, we have a lot of people now that are at home, or that can do stuff, researchers, developers, all of that stuff, and they put them on things, whether it's in the gaming industry, on games that never existed, you know, that never came out, or were you know, to machines that they had plans on come out, and okay, maybe now's the time. So I think like whether we are in this midst of a global crisis and pandemic, it also gives a lot for like sort of creativity and a different focus on innovation. And I think you can see that a little bit like from the gaming industry, that you see them coming out with new games, also the bigger brands and Nintendo and all of that stuff. But I do see that also coming from the industry fairly soon, you know, to start to bring out preliminary, like maybe software, hardware, like tools, machines and all of that stuff. And for me myself, it's like I have my projects, and I think as creators, we all have things that we have on the bench or on our shelf, you know, that we wanted to touch and that we didn't because work, because stress, because whatever is going on, you know. And I think what I see is that everybody's pulling that up, and I just love to see that, you know. I love the talk with Michael that you did with all of that stuff. I see him publish a lot. I see all of us like publish just a lot of things that are not branded, that are not from the companies, that are not work, that is research, that is pure, that is our own sort of, you know. And I think that's a pretty thing. That's a really pretty thing that most of the time we as sort of nerds, like we spend a lot of our time on the internet and on behind software and behind the computer and all of that stuff. And now it's a nice time that all of the visual artists are really thriving and publishing their own spirit. I think that's something nice, because normally we're so clunked up with work that we sometimes forget what our real soul is, sort of.
Thank you, Anouk. I think we can wrap it up. Oh, we've got a question.
I guess I have a question. Firstly, thank you so much, Anouk. It was so much pleasure to meet you. In fact, it's like from my screen. But I just listened your one of conversation. I guess it was in TED Talks. So there you were mentioning why you are starting your career. And you were saying something which I'm just trying to remember. I don't know, maybe the words might not be correct, but you were saying even without looking the people's face, I might understand what they're feeling from what they wear. So it was a little bit touched with me. Like it's kind of true. And nowadays we are like, you know, far from the interaction each other. So what you are thinking, that I'm just trying to wrap up my question, but my mind is a little bit confused what to ask, because I have many questions.
I think what I was trying to say about it, I think technology is bringing a lot of good to us, sort of, you know, but it also causes us a lot of stress, and oftentimes technology is out there to overwhelm us, sort of, you know. So what are more gentle ways? What are less invasive ways? What are different ways? And maybe technology needs to listen to the body, you know, instead of to our hand palms or you know, and there are ways that can do that. So what is that symbiosis between technology and you, sort of, you know, and I think that's a little bit what it was about, if I got you correct. A lot of times we get overwhelmed by technology, and what is the more poetic notion of that, you know? How can we use technology as a familiar, or as a spirit, or something that is part of us, that is connected to us in different ways, sort of.
Sense. And the other thing is, have you ever think like use some of the global problem from like to express in your design, like giving an example, maybe for climate change, or maybe for the some gender discrimination, or for something like. Have you ever thought?
I think like we haven't really talked about that too much now, but spider dress is a fairly feministic design, I must say. Whether the design is really there to protect the body, and in this case, a woman. You know, my model Whitney in the case of the presentation, sort of, and I think that dress. I think that dress gets a lot of fan, I get a lot of reactions to that, especially from girls. One reaction in specific is, and that always got to me. I was giving a lecture at Georgia Tech, the computing department, on the supercomputing conference. And there was a girl, and she knew my work. She had no eyesight. She was blind. She could see for 5%. So she could see moving parts, and she really liked the spider dress. And she came to the lecture. She came out because she wants to meet me. And she showed me the sonification lab at Georgia Tech. But she said, the spider dress for me made such an impression on me, because she tries to navigate her world in a city that she senses in different ways, you know. For her, it was the notion of like her not having to. She's a little bit shy. She doesn't want to say you're too close by, but for other than us having maybe most of our senses maybe not, sort of, you know. For her in specific, it was really a thing that she has to deal with. Like, we might get anxious, we might, there are a lot of that stuff, but she had to really deal with people in her personal space the whole day without really having that agency of herself defining that personal space. So that was a really emotional piece for her, sort of, you know. So I think everybody connects differently to projects, and I think that's kind of that's what I like. Some people like the smoke dress for being expressive, or they're shy, or you know, like I love to wear, like, smoke dress is one of my favorites, because it's this good balance of elegance, and also the protectiveness of the smoke. The spider dress is really fierce. It's another of my favorites, because it's really out there to catch you, and it can really protect you physically, like, you know. So working with robotics on the body and working with these things on the body, it goes a lot into like emotions and all of that stuff. So I somehow really like those talks. Regarding to the others, like sustainability and all of that stuff, the main thing what I looking into materials, like with the Cirque du Soleil project that we had, we were looking in like pineapple leather instead of normal leather, like using different materials. I'm always aware of that, always try to work with that. I got really excited like way back when we could 3D print with wood, but still there's a lot of like plastic involved with the 3D printing filament, of course. So with for example, fashion, with technology, with architecture, with everything also comes, of course, a lot of pollution, comes a lot of that, and I think it's always good to actively address it. I haven't done it necessarily like in a current project, but I am busy with a personal project that has a little bit of relation to that, but that will come out, I think, in the end of the year, beginning next year, because of my current projects. But I think it's always good to be aware from the fashion side. What I always try to explain is the cotton industry is one of the most polluting industries in the world, yet we want to have cheap shirts and we want to have a lot of them, and our wardrobes are insanely big, you know. So if you have like garment pieces like that are a little bit more close to you, that might know you, that like are intelligent, that might have a little computer in them, you know, we might be able to, instead of having that really big wardrobe, to have like a smaller wardrobe with more intelligent pieces in there that we might use, that we might mix and match, you know. And I'm really interested in that, where techno fashion and fashion tech comes more into there at play. We are going to treat our garments because they might be a little bit a bigger price point, but they also get to know us, so they really become really personal, involved with us, sort of, you know. Like my leather jacket, for example, if I lose it, I'm really sad. And that notion, if I maybe lose my $2 shirt, I'm not sad. Why not? You know, that's also a piece of clothing that has also a history. And with the cotton industry being really poisonous and all of that stuff, it's good if our wardrobe becomes like in a way smaller, you know, so yeah, that by that, I think, yeah, there's a lot of like interesting initiatives, especially in fashion. It's just, and in other fields as well, it just needs to push harder or be pushed harder, because I think now we are in the midst of a big pandemic, and it's like, oh my God, like we need to do something. Well, we needed to do something about the world itself for a long time, you know, and still we keep doing things. And I love to see now we use less cars, of course, there's less pollution. And all of that stuff, but soon we go back, you know. So when are these bigger changes being made, you know? And I think that's up to all of us, and all of us in any field, whether we are a doctor or a cook or a fashion tech designer or an architect. It's all of up to all of us to, yeah, to research that, and you might find something that really makes a big impact, like on the world. And yeah, I'm super interested in that.
Thank you so much for the debate. It was amazing.
Oh, thank you.
By the way, I like your earrings and rings. It was so good.
Oh yeah, they
so good.
They have liquids in there, like this is blue, black liquid. And
I guess it's ink.
Huh?
Yeah, it's full of ink, or
oh, one more time.
Is it ink inside the ring?
Ink, yes. One time I was in New York, and there was this really cool hotel, and everything was white. And I was like, oh my God, this hotel is so cool, because yeah, I like just things. Sometimes I like them in like one color, black, white, gray, silver, you know, and I stepped in that room, and it was just like one color, or non-color actually. And I was so excited. And then later on I had one of the big ones, and it exploded. So I was like, no shit. And it was like literally everywhere, and I was so ashamed. So it was easy to clean, but it was just this big splash of ink. And I was like, oh, because I was like, yeah, I don't know, I was like walking around in the hotel room. I thought it was a really cool place. And then I was like, oh, exactly at that moment, but nothing got damaged, so that was good. But in the first time, when everything splashes, you know, you're like, holy shit, how am I gonna explain this to the hotel? But it was all like, go wipe it down. Yeah,
maybe
so
you might say, I just put a little bit of color on it.
I know, right? Maybe it needed it, I don't know. But yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
I like to wear them. I like the weight of them. When you put things on your fingers, there's a certain weight to it, and it makes your hands rotate differently. And I like that feel. I don't know. It's a funny thing.
Yeah, I also like the feeling of wearing rings. If it's like heavy, it's just kind of giving a direction to your hands and gestures. It's good.
Almost grounds you, you know, pushes you to the But yeah, cool for it. Yeah, thank you so much for your questions. Those are good ones.
So much. Yeah.
Thank you. If there is anything else, do you still have a moment, or?
Yeah, if you have one last question.
No, I mean, from my side, I'm very excited that you did this talk. Yeah, we've got a question in a chat. No, it's just a congratulation. It says, I'm really excited that we had the opportunity to hear about your amazing work from yourself. And
thank you, by the way, for doing this, because you have been like streaming like with all kinds of people the whole week. I see you pop up. I wake up, and yeah, I got into the conversation when you had with Michael about pufferfish and all. So that was really fun. I just woke up and I just texted in on Facebook, and you guys were talking. I was like, this is awesome, you know. So I think it's really cool to be so actively that a lot of communities at the moment are like super active. So yeah, thank you for organizing that.
Yeah, well, that's yeah, it's my pleasure. The thing is that we didn't have the opportunity to meet the people in person, and we used to somehow organize all sorts of events and find we were looking for excuses to invite people here. You know, we are now sitting in Bratislava, which is not the usual place where people would gather for the computational design and all sorts of, but it's changing. It's there is a lot of other events that are happening, and we always were looking for some reason to drag people here and to meet them, because we were always thinking of being part of the community of the computational design, but we are not on the top of the world. But we are still trying to participate actively, and there is no chance to do that now. And So I took the chance with the Digital Futures conference that approached me to actually contribute with a workshop. So it's partly that I'm streaming a lot. So this is day 6 out of 7, and we are starting early in the morning. People are patient to listen to me talking, but I don't only want to give some tutorials. That's something that I would usually do, but I also want people to communicate, talk about concepts, and to meet. So it's awesome that you participated. We also had Mike Pryor. We had Manuel Jimenez Garcia from Nagami.
So that's
that was also awesome.
He had a whole sci-fi studio in the back.
Yeah. He had that. Well, we are having this hipsterish studio improvised here instead. But also for tomorrow, I have scheduled a lot of talks. I will put on Facebook all the names, and we are going to make super short interviews, and that will be wrapping up. And this is also some sort of a therapy for myself, because you know, you can't travel, you can't meet people, we can call each other. We do that, but that's not the same. At least this way, doing it kind of publicly, it gives it certain structure, and it's amazing.
Yeah, correct.
And for me, this was an excuse to actually finally approach you and to talk to you about your work, which I've been following, well, as we spoke, since the exhibition probably, which is 2011, 2012. So
yeah.
Anyway, thank you one more time. Thank you for joining us. Congratulations to the amazing work that you're doing, and hope that we are going to see way more of it.
Yeah, cool. Thank you for leading the discussion.